gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this year, and we have Andy Vasily with us. Andy is a leading teacher who has taught at international baccalaureate schools in 4 different countries over the past 15 years. He completed his teacher training at the University of Windsor in Ontario, Canada. Andy had taught up until August this year, and he's now moved into a full-time role as an international educational consultant. Andy previously worked as a child youth counsellor at a young offenders facility in Windsor, Ontario, and it was through this experience that he first realised the stumbling blocks and injustices that many of these young people faced in their daily experience. As a direct result of seeing a need for change, he pursued a full-time career as an educator. Andy's keynote presentation today is Reaching Within to Achieve Excellence. So please warmly welcome Andy Vasily.
Can you hear me? Thumbs up. I've been in Australia 3 days now, and I still have no idea what fair dinkum means. But I've got a few more days to figure it out. It's an honor to be here today, so thank you for listening to what I have to say. I want to thank the people that you see on the screen here for making the conference happen. There's so much time and energy that goes into planning these events behind the scenes. So a warm thank you and congratulations to the ACHPER committee for making this conference happen. The focus of my talk today is to kind of zero in on the things that I believe matter most in teaching, and to share with you some key fundamentals that have driven me over the last several years in regards to my own pursuit of excellence within my own professional learning journey and education. I'm very passionate about physical education. It means everything to me. I love it. And I'm constantly striving to learn as much as I can about my subject area. However, the stories, lessons, and ideas that I share with you today will seem like they have nothing at all to do with physical education. However, I can assure you that they have everything to do with shaping the physical educator and person who stands before you right now. There are many passionate physical educators here at the ACHPER Conference who will lead workshops to share their valuable knowledge, insight, and experiences that have had a profound impact on their programs. We've got top lecturers here or researchers here who will share their expertise with you in regards to different teaching models of physical education. As well, we have amazing department heads and other PE teachers here who will share their insight and their teaching approaches and teaching strategies that have also had a profound impact on student learning. So it's imperative that you absorb as much as you can from them, taking away the big ideas and putting them into practice first thing on Monday morning. So be a sponge and learn as much as you can about our subject area. Like I said, my talk today is nothing that's PE specific, but more so to strike at the heart about what it means to be an educator and the power and potential that we have to change lives forever. To me, this is what ultimately defines us, the long-lasting impact that we have on the young minds who cross our paths throughout our career. It's the footprints that we leave on our profession that matter the most. So regardless of your role in education or your purpose for being here today, I ask you to connect the dots in your own lives and see what may resonate with you as I share 3 very valuable lessons that I've learned over the past several years that I feel are applicable on both a personal and professional level. And these lessons to me are very simple, yet so complex. 3 of them: to be mindful, to be prepared, and to be inspired. And it's through a near-tragic experience that I learned to appreciate the value and importance of these lessons and the role that they play in my life. 5 years ago, I was almost killed in an accident in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Long story short, a bus had backed into a group of students in a crowded parking lot at an international school soccer tournament. Fortunately, none of the students were hurt. But sensing danger, I, as any good teacher would do, I ran up beside the bus and I smacked the door of the bus to get the driver's attention. He didn't stop, so I smacked it again. The problem was the glass in the door was not proper safety glass, but more like wine glass. So when I smacked it a second time, that's when my hand plunged through, and the broken shards of razor-sharp glass completely severed the ulnar artery in my left wrist. I knew that it was a serious arterial injury because blood had squirted out and almost splashed the driver of the bus. I fumbled about in desperation and grabbed onto my wrist to try to stop the bleeding and put my hand as high above my head as I could. And with blood pouring down all over my head and body, I thought to myself, well, I think I freaked somebody out. So, Dr. James, my wife, went in the operating room with me. And Dr. James, I awoke to be told by Dr. James that the extent of damage to my wrist was too serious, that my artery was obliterated. So he couldn't reattach it, so he performed what's called an arterial ligation, which is essentially to stitch the artery closed on either side. So a temporary solution. So I was told that I would need follow-up reconstructive surgery as soon as possible to reattach the artery and repair all of the damage to the nerves, muscles, tendons, and ligaments. So after 2 weeks of lots of drama dealing with insurance and other issues, I was flown to Singapore where I underwent total reconstruction of my left wrist by a top hand specialist there. And it was this hand specialist who made it very clear to me that there was a distinct possibility that my hand would never recover. At this point, there was no feeling or movement at all. This was followed by 3 months of intensive, very painful rehabilitation back in Canada. And it was during that time that I began to doubt whether or not I would ever be able to use my hand again. I couldn't tie my shoes or do up the buttons on my shirt. I was physically active. I couldn't run. I couldn't do any of the things, golfing, any of the things that I love to do. And it was the first time in my life where I truly began to empathize with disabled people. To this day, my hand only functions at 60 to 70% of what it once did. But it's not the lack of recovery which has impacted me most about this accident. It's the fact that it truly changed me forever. And it opened my eyes to what matters most in my life. And it allowed me to understand the importance of pursuing both personal and professional excellence. I'd like to now share with you the 3 valuable lessons that I learned and how they've woven their way into my journey in education. The first one, as I said, seems so simple, but it's to be mindful and to slow down. You know, we hear all the time people saying 3 days to the weekend or TGIF, or we hear people saying only 4 weeks to the summer vacation, or conversely, we hear people saying the time flies by, that the days blur into weeks and the weeks blur into months, and before we know it, another school year has passed. I believe that when we sincerely reflect back on these times, we sometimes realize that we've been repeating the same old cycles, patterns, and routines in our lives. Without question, we're doing good work. We're teaching well. But to what extent have we actually grown, learned, and deepened our practice? For me, this is the point that I was at a few years back before my accident. I was stuck on repeat mode, unable to move forward and grasp the bigger picture of what teaching means and the impact that I can have on my students. The last thing that I was thinking about when my accident happened was, I can't believe summer vacation is almost here. Or, oh my God, next week I have to teach movement composition and I'm crap at teaching dance. Instead, I was seriously praying for my life. And I was praying for a sign that I would be okay, and I was pleading for more time. And then amazingly, I was given it. What was I truly going to do with this time? Was I going to repeat the same old patterns and cycles? Or was I going to look at my life and my teaching through a completely new lens, a different lens? This is when gratitude took on a whole new significance to me in my life. 3 months after my accident, my family and I made the transition over to our amazing school in Nanjing, China. And it's here that during this time that something was beginning to kind of shift deeply within me. That's very hard to explain even to this day. But I think that getting back to teaching was one of the best medicines that I needed at the time to help me overcome the emotional and physical trauma from the accident. And I began becoming more mindful of each teaching moment and what it offered me. And this is where reflection began to play a very powerful role in my life and continues to do so to this day. A while back, my wife and I were listening to our favorite podcast, the TED Radio Hour. And in this one episode, there was a Benedictine monk named David Steindl-Rast. And his talk deeply connected and resonated with me in regards to the first lesson that I'm sharing with you, which is the importance of being mindful and slowing down. And what David said in the episode was that people need to create more stop signs in their lives. That so many of us run blindly through our days, failing to understand the value and importance of being mindful and slowing down and being present. And in creating these stop signs in our lives, we're forced to slow down to a halt and become acutely aware of what's happening around us. And that it's absolutely necessary to create quiet time and quiet space in our lives to better reflect on our lives, on our jobs, on our families, what's working and what's not. And it's so incredibly easy to fall into a rut and cruise on autopilot when things seem to be working. But mindful reflection allows us to uncover the hidden gems of our teaching practice and discover new pathways to growth, learning, and improvement. I made it a goal over the last several years to kind of create my own quiet time and quiet space to better reflect and to think about what's working and what's not. And this may be in complete silence in a quiet room someplace in the house after my wife and kids have gone to school. Or it might be during one of my early morning runs. But I can say with total sincerity that since I've made the conscious decision to carve out more time in my life for this daily practice, it's allowed me to examine what's serving me well and what isn't, and to simply remove what's not serving me well. It's allowed me to get in tune with the heartbeat of my mind and to better reflect on the work that I do and my life in general. So if you are a person who already creates that quiet space, that quiet reflective space, and you take this time, great. But if you're not that person, then I'm going to give you the 5-minute Mr. Andy challenge. But before I do that, I have a prize to give away. First person to stand up and shout out the answer to this wins an autographed ACHPER football. How many minutes are in a day?
1440.
1,400 and the winner. Here you go, man. So my challenge to you is to carve out just 5 minutes of that 1,440 minutes, which is less than 1%, to find a quiet space and to begin to reflect. And this is not meditation. No, not at all. Okay? It is just simply slowing your mind down, being in a quiet place and reflecting on what's working and what's not in your teaching in your life. So the first lesson is about creating these stop signs and becoming more mindful and employing reflection into your everyday life. So I hope you're ready for that. The next thing that I want to talk about is the importance of being prepared. But before getting into that, I want to share this great book with you. It's called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, and it's written by Chris Hadfield. Are there any Canadians here? Am I the only one? Oh, one, right there. So you might know who Chris Hadfield is. Chris Hadfield is Canadian, And he is one of NASA's most well-known decorated astronauts. He's flown several space shuttle missions and even spent 5 months straight way up there someplace in the International Space Station back in 2013. If you have not read his book, I highly recommend it. There are so many valuable lessons in there that are applicable to our everyday lives as educators. And he tells one story in particular that really connected with me. And the second lesson that I'm sharing with you is the importance of being prepared and to never underestimate the value of little details in our life and our teaching. And it has to do with flying jets, playing guitar, and Elton John. Now, I told you that my talk would not have anything to do with PE, right? So a few years back, Chris Hadfield was invited to be the lead pilot in a Canadian military air show. And the organizers told him at the same time they were hosting an Elton John concert. And they were going to cross-promote both the concert and the air show. Then they told him when the air show was done, they were going to bring him over to meet Elton John and to watch the concert from backstage. So what a lot of people don't know is not only is Chris Hadfield an astronaut and a fighter jet pilot, he's also an accomplished musician. He's played acoustic guitar his whole life. He even brought the guitar up to the International Space Station with him and recorded a bunch of songs. So he got thinking to himself, okay, I'm going to meet Elton John. I love Elton John. So there's a distinct possibility that Elton John might find out that I'm a musician and ask me to go on stage to play music with him. So then he took it to the next level. He's like, okay, when this happens, I need to be ready. So I need to think of the song that Elton John is going to want me to play. My second giveaway. So what song do you think Chris Hadfield... Okay, I heard it back there. There you go. No lawsuits if that gets you in the So, yes, Rocket Man. So, even though Chris Hadfield could play Rocket Man already, also Chris Hadfield had played in many bands and played some big events, including the Houston Symphony. So he was thinking, I need to be prepared. So for 6 months before the air show, he practiced Rocket Man every spare moment that he had. And after a couple months, he could play an almost perfect rendition of Rocket Man, and even sounded like Elton John. But to him, that wasn't enough. He kept practicing it, paying close attention to all the details of the song and his voice. Well, the air show happens. He's brought over backstage to meet Elton John, and they have an amazing 15-minute conversation about music, about life, about space. And you know what happened? Elton John never asked him to go on stage to play Rocket Man. He tells this story to illustrate a very important point, that they had practiced so hard for something to not have it happen. But to him, the most important thing was that he was prepared and he was ready. And not only was he ready, had Elton John asked him to go on stage and play Rocket Man with him, he would have kicked ass. And there's a very transferable lesson over to our teaching. And it's all about the importance of being prepared and the value of little details. And maybe it's an over-planned lesson, or noticing that one student when he or she is in the right zone of proximal development. Maybe it's being prepared and planned for that, the right word and the right question at the exact right time. Whatever it is, when we encourage ourselves to be prepared and pay attention to the little details in our teaching, both ours and our students' experiences are enriched. We have to avoid falling into the trap of routine methodical thinking that looks only at the big picture of teaching. So when it comes down to it, being prepared at the micro level means never overlooking these seemingly subtle details in our lives and our teaching. To me, this is what I believe to be one of the strongest areas of my teaching over the last several years. I spend so much loads of time and energy into my planning and my preparation, looking at both the little and big details of my teaching, and it's definitely served me well, and it has served my students well. So the next time you find yourself kind of rushing around like mad, failing to zero in on these small, subtle details in our teaching, or being overplanned for a lesson, I want to remind you about the Elton John story. And as Chris Hadfield says, we're always told, don't sweat the small stuff. But he's here to kind of get in your space a little bit and challenge you to sweat the small stuff if you want to be the very best that you can be at whatever it is that you do. So a very applicable lesson to us as educators. So the last lesson or idea that I want to talk about is the importance of being inspired. And it's this last lesson that specifically relates to purpose, and the idea that clarifying our purpose truly helps to put into perspective just how powerful a role that we can have as educators on those around us. And I think that we always need to be very aware of this, that ultimately great teaching is about servicing others and making a difference in their lives. And it's this endless pursuit of both personal and professional excellence that ultimately defines who we are and the legacy that we leave behind us as we journey through our careers in education. Very important to think about this. So I want to share an amazing story with you that I first heard about from my man, Andy Hare. Andy is here in the audience. Come here, Andy. Andy is one of the main reasons why I'm here.
Thanks, Mark.
Along with Ross, Halliday, and Bernie. So Andy's a very passionate physical educator from Geelong. And he's also very passionate about triathlons. And he's constantly seeking his own inspiration to fuel his passion forward as he prepares for competitions. When he told me about the Team Hoyt story, it immediately connected with my last lesson, the importance of being inspired and inspiring others. I think we always have to remember that all we do as educators is about serving a much longer goal or purpose than just today or next week. And many of the students that we teach may not blossom for years to come, but we serve them best by remembering that they will blossom one day. And it's our nurturing, our warmth, our support, and our love that matters the most. How many people here are parents of a school-aged child? Raise your hand. So I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, and I know that when I send them off to school every day, it is my hope that their teachers will treat them with warmth, with respect, will encourage them, inspire them, and nurture them to be the best people that they can be. And I know you would all want the same thing for your children. And those of you that don't have children, your parents want the exact same thing for you. As educators, hundreds of parents send their children to us every single day wanting the same thing. We always have to remember that and embrace that, even on our tough days. I'm going to show you a 4-minute video right now that will give you a glimpse into the Team Hoyt story. As you watch the video, please keep in mind the powerful role that you play on the young people who cross your paths and pass through your gyms throughout your career. Each and every one of you is a difference maker who is changing lives forever, one student at a time.
I can only imagine what it will be like when I walk by your side. I can only imagine what my eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able I can only imagine. I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I do is forever worship you. I can only imagine, yeah. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in awe of you be still? Or will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees, or will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak it all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when all I do is forever worship you. I can only imagine.
When Rick Hoyt was born, his parents were told by the doctors to never expect anything from their son, that he would be completely dependent upon them for his every need, and that he may only live until his 20s or 30s, that life was going to be very difficult. But they refused to accept that, and they made a decision to raise their son as any parent would raise their child. Rick Hoyt could not speak at all or communicate at all until he was 8 years old, when his family received a special computer that allowed him to use his forehead to tap out simple messages on a computer screen. And it was back in 1977, when he was 8 or 9, that he communicated to his father that he wanted to be in a 5-mile race that his school had organized, and he wanted his dad to push him in the wheelchair. So his dad happily agreed. They went in the race and finished dead last. That night, Rick Hoyt had communicated with his father that being in the race made him feel like he could run and that he wasn't handicapped. And he was like, "Dad, let's go on more races." Well, his father, ex-military, athlete, marathoner, had fallen way out of shape. So he was inspired to get back in shape. And soon Rick Hoyt and his father were going in every 5-mile race that they could, which led to them going in many half marathons, which led to them doing many full marathons. Rick Hoyt and his father completed the Boston Marathon 32 years in a row. Extraordinary. The 31st year was going to be their last year. That's when the Boston bombs went off. So they were like, "Screw that, we're going back one more time." So they finished the Boston Marathon, having done it 32 times. They also competed in several Ironman triathlons. True difference makers, because they inspired thousands of parents with kids with disabilities to get their kids involved in races and triathlons, which led to a whole movement of volunteers to to go into orphanages where there are kids with severe disabilities and get them involved in races and marathons. So definitely difference makers and a very inspirational story. And when filtered down to the bare essence of what making a difference means, we see how father and son were inspired by one another. And it was this inspiration that motivated them to pursue what's most important in life, to give it your all, to love whatever you do with all of your heart, and to find inspiration on a daily basis to be the best person that you can be. Very transferable over to our lives as educators when we think of the impact that we can have on the students that we teach. We not only inspire them, they inspire us, and it's a cycle. So it's something that you're all going on summer vacation in 4 weeks. You've got a choice to tune completely out from teaching, which is what you should do for part of it to recharge and refuel. But you need to always remember the value of being an educator and the power and potential that you have to change lives forever. Jim Carrey gave an amazing commencement speech at a top business management school a few years back. And there's one quote in particular that really stuck with me, that resonated with me, that I share wherever I go, with every school I work with, every teacher I work with. And it's this: how will you serve the world? What do they need that your talent can provide? That's all you have to figure out. The effect that you have on others is the most valuable currency that there is. So, if you forget my lesson about being mindful and being prepared and being inspired, remember one last thing: that you can change the world one student at a time. Thank you.